Hey everybody, welcome to Sailing Tips. Today we're going to talk all about flares, different kinds, how to use them, and why they should be relegated to the history books. So I have an old box of flares here, ironically labeled Christmas decorations. And so we're going to set off a bunch of these old flares, and you'll see exactly how they work. And the interesting thing is that all of these old flares will actually work, despite the fact that they're all expired. There are basically 4 different kinds of flares. There's handheld, smoke, rocket, and parachute flares. Plus, there's 2 different broad types of flares, including SOLAS flares, safety of life at sea. These are required for commercial vessels, and pleasure craft flares, which are quite a bit cheaper, but as you'll see, they are somewhat less effective. One nice thing about the SOLAS flares is that the instructions are in large print and pretty clear. This one says, unscrew the lid, pull the tab, throw it in the water. These are pleasure craft flares, and the instructions are tiny, and there are 4 steps to launching this, and it's actually not even obvious what you're actually supposed to do. So hence, one of my first problems with flares is that in many cases they sit there in your boat. No one reads the instructions, nobody practices with them, and so when it comes time to use them, you have no idea what to do. Okay, we're going to start with this SOLAS smoke flare. And I've got a bucket of water here. I've got my welding gloves, my safety glasses, and I'm going to put on my hearing protection because these things are actually pretty loud. So put on my hearing protection, put on my welding gloves. Now, this is the other thing. You're probably not going to have welding gloves, hearing protection, and eye protection in an emergency. Take the lid off. I'm going to point this thing away from me, and I'm going to pull the cord. This will continue to burn like this for about 3 minutes. So this is pretty much done burning now. But what I want to show you here is why they tell you to throw it in the water. It's because it's stinking hot. And I'm going to throw it in the water here. I'm not sure if you caught that, but the water is kind of like bubbling around it. Okay, the next one we're going to show you is a SOLAS hand flare. This one is similar. You untie or you unscrew the base and you pull the string. So I'm going to get the string out before I put my welding gloves on. There we go. Okay. 1, 2, 3, go. This thing is super bright. Like, I can hardly even look at it. Once again, like, it's red hot. Like, this thing is stinking hot. Like, you could burn yourself, 3rd-degree burns, or set your boat on fire. Watch this. So, flares might save you from an emergency, but they might well create another one. That was a SOLAS grade hand flare. Now we're going to try a recreation grade hand flare, and you'll see that there's quite a difference. This one is a bit harder and a bit unintuitive to use. The SOLAS flares, you unscrew the thing, you pull the cord, easy peasy. This one here, you actually have to read the fine instructions again. For this particular one, you take the lid off, then you take another little lid off here, and there's a striker, and you light it like a match. So once again, I'll put my safety equipment on and we'll check it out. And you'll see that the way this one burns is much different than the SOLAS hand flare. It's less bright, but it also drips molten slag. So you don't want to be dripping molten slag all over your boat. Okay, here we go. So as you can see, I mean, it's got light, but it's not nearly as bright as the SOLAS hand flare. It's getting a bit brighter now, but still, from where I'm sitting, there's literally no comparison. And now you can see it's starting to drip molten slag. So you want to make sure that you're holding it over the edge of your boat and downwind. And like, I'm wearing welding gloves, and this is kind of scary here. So maybe we all need to keep welding gloves on our boats. Look at this thing dripping. Like, do you want this thing dripping on your boat? Like, if your boat isn't already on fire, it will be. Here, I'll hold it over here. Wind shift, wind shift. Ah, still dripping molten slag. Look at that. Like, look at the drips coming out of it. This grass is wet, and you can see the grass smoking from where the molten slag is dripping on it. Okay. Now we're going to try a SOLAS parachute rocket flare. Similar to the other SOLAS flares, take the cap off, there's a string. And let's see what happens here. Okay, that was a little bit hard to see, and it went way higher than I expected. Like, these trees are probably close to 100 feet tall. It went at least twice as high as the trees and over the trees. I can't believe how loud this thing is. I had these earmuffs on, and my ear is like still ringing, despite these are pretty substantial hearing protectors. If you weren't wearing hearing protectors, your ears would be totally ringing after this. Okay, so now we're going to try this recreation grade launcher. And this one is, it's like a shotgun style. This one's actually really easy. I kind of like this one. Open it up, pop the cartridge in, close it, and I'll put I'm not going to wear welding gloves for this one. This is hard to pull the trigger. You basically cock it and fire. So, I don't know, I'm not quite sure where it went. I mean, the cool thing about this particular flare is, I mean, if I was a pirate, I would think twice about approaching somebody who was pointing one of these at me. So I've just shot off a bunch of flares for you, and I still have a giant box of expired flares in my basement. You know, not really Christmas decorations, but I'm just one boat. And how many boats out there are going to have a giant box of expired flares? It's one of the other things I don't like about flares is the waste. You have to replace them every 4 years, whether they're good or not. Instead, the Transport Canada Safe Boating Guide has recognized that if you have a means of two-way communication or an EPIRB, you can cut the number of flares you carry on your boat in half, which is great. I just wish they would go the rest of the way and say that you don't need to carry any flares if you have either a handheld radio with DSC, a personal locator beacon, or an EPIRB. These also expire, but they're a lot easier to use. They're a lot safer, and in my opinion, a lot better because they can guide the rescuers to you. You can communicate with the rescuers and tell them what's going on. One thing about flares that I didn't mention, people might think, oh, well, I can use it to guide a helicopter to me at night. Well, no, you can't actually, because the helicopter pilots will likely be wearing night vision goggles. And if you set off one of these flares, especially like a SOLAS handheld flare, you'll blind the pilots, which is really the last thing you want to do. So I think it's really time, personally, to relegate flares to history, kind of like Morse code. It was useful at a time, but in 2022, there are far better options. If you found this video useful, leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel, leave any comments below, and thanks so much for watching. Bye for now.